The Financial Administration Act, Article 19.1, it says that the governors and the ministers here in Canada may, by regulation, prescribe, here you go again that word, fees or charges to be paid for a right or privilege. Look at that. For a right or privilege conferred, given to you by Her Majesty the Queen, by means of a permit or license. So your rights and your privileges that you have here in Canada are being given to you, are conferred to you by Her Majesty. And the way you get these rights and privileges is by means of a permit or a license that you will pay for. Canada, Oath or Affirmation of Citizenship. I, affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, and to all her successors, and that I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada and fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen. Therefore, as a Canadian citizen, you are considered one person in a class of persons who have given or pledged allegiance to Her Majesty. And Her Majesty, she confers or gives you rights and privileges that you pay for. This is our existence here in Canada. Our rights and privileges that we pay for through permits or licenses or other authoritative means are conferred or given to us by Her Majesty, because we are considered Canadian citizens. Why would we allow Her Majesty to control our lives? That doesn't make any sense. There is a voice of opposition in Canada against the freedom expression that is going on in Canada right now. But that voice of opposition, besides being maybe a few that fully do understand what's going on in law, and they are just greedy and evil-hearted and have crooked motives, that's why they want this to continue. If we realize what's going on in law, why would we want this structure to continue in our personal lives? Why would we give over our rights that are naturally given to us in order to have rights and privileges conferred upon us? I guess because most of us don't realize that we are rich. And when I say that word rich, right away I'm sure there's a qualification that jumps to money. And yes, it has to be in the form of a money, but we are rich because of the resources that were here in Canada before Her Majesty came along and decided that she would claim all these resources and use them for her and her family and stick us in the situations that we are in today. Now, we are all rich and we all have a security that has these riches, if you will, that is available to us in order to express this richness of the land that has been placed in a monetary form. Now, I did not say why do we allow law to control us, because I do believe in law, very much so. I believe in law under common law. And you can find common law expressed in many, many areas of our lives. But when you understand what common law is, it's a beautiful thing. Now, statutes and regulations and enactments are what strips the human being of his rights and freedoms. It's what strips the human being the ability to operate under or in common law fully. And instead, these statutes and enactments, they cause us to take designation or recognition as a legal person, and as such we belong to Her Majesty. We belong to the system. And the system will try to yoke us with its controlling power, the regulations and the rules thereof. But those regulations and rules, they don't apply to a human being. They're there for her servants. They're there for Canadian citizens who have pledged allegiance to Her Majesty, and that Her Majesty have given you rights and freedoms. But Canada does recognize other rights and freedoms that are in existence and that have been in existence, and we can operate under those rights and freedoms of our human being without having to be part of this system, without having to be part of this controlling mechanism that's going on. From my own personal experience, I think one of the last freedoms of expression that a human being should do is to travel free, because in that operation of your rights and freedoms, you will get some opposition, most likely, and that will be the time that you will express your understanding, and you will be able to express all that you need to, maybe within a court of law, if not at least with the police who you will be speaking to when they wonder, why do you not have a license plate on your car? What's going on? So I'm not advocating that as soon as you understand your rights and freedoms and what they've done to you, to go and start driving your car. That's ridiculous. That's unwise to do. Because once again, that's sort of like putting yourself on the front lines of the battle. Studying, learning, knowing who you are in the privacy of your own home, with the groups of people, in the libraries, doing research. That's okay. Getting on the front lines in your car with no license plate is saying, hey, look at me. You better be able to defend yourself. So I'm not advocating that you take these actions right away, but I'm using this as an example here. Most of us can say, when we were driving or traveling as a legal person, that we received a ticket at one time or another, and we think it was a silly ticket, whatever it may be. The police, they stopped us and gave us a ticket. Now what really happened there was you were considered a Canadian citizen, a legal person. Okay, and you were given, or you took the right or privilege to drive by or through Her Majesty and through her minister, the transportation minister, the highway minister, whatever province minister it is for you that issues you that permit, that driver's permit, that license. Well, that's what happened. You paid for it. You got issued a permit through the minister on behalf of Her Majesty for a right or a privilege to drive. And then the police were given the right or the privilege to regulate you. Not you as the human being, but you as that legal person, as that Canadian citizen. And that's what they did. They used an enactment or a regulation to regulate you. This is silly. The fact that this is going on is ridiculous. My girlfriend, she likes to keep fish. She has 2 goldfish. She's had them for about 4 years now. They were little baby things, and now they're big. They're really big. Anyways, the tank that she had for over 10 years had a problem recently. She had to change the fish tank. So we went to Walmart to get a new fish tank. She got one. It was a 20-gallon fish tank, and she had to put it in her backseat of her car. Now, she still drives with her legal permit. She still drives as a legal person, as a Canadian citizen. She is slowly taking her steps. She's done a claim of rights, and she's done other actions, but presently she's still traveling as a juridical personality. Now, I saw 2 police officers in a car. They had just finished dealing with somebody they had given a ticket to on the side of the road. They turned her, as we were passing by, they turned around and they began to follow us because her back window was blocked up. They proceeded to follow us for about a block. I guess they had ran her license plate, and then they turned on their lights and they were asking us to pull over. So I told my girlfriend to pull over. Now they both got out of their car and they both approached our car, both on one side, one on the passenger and one on the driver's side. My girlfriend rolled down her window. I rolled down my window completely. The guy approached me, walked up to me. He was a younger man. He looked into be in the young man, 24, something like that. He said, "Can I have a piece of ID, please?" And I said, "No, you may not." I said, "I have no obligation to produce any ID to you. I'm just sitting here in this vehicle. There's no obligation here." So he stepped back. He was shocked that I said that, and then I repeated myself again, and he said, "Fine." He said, "You have no obligation to identify yourself." Now the other gentleman, the other police officer, was speaking to my wife, to my girlfriend, and said, "Can I have your ID, please?" And I said, "Hang on a second." I said, "What's the problem here?" And they said, well, your back window is blocked and it's against the highway safety code. And I know the highway safety code. And so I informed them. I said, listen, I said, that's not against the highway safety code. If you go check, you'll see it's not against the highway safety code. So they went back and they checked in their car, and they checked, and they came back to us and they said, oh, I'm sorry, sir, you're absolutely right, it's not against the highway safety code. So then he still wanted a piece of ID from my girlfriend. And I said, well, why are you asking her for a piece of ID? You don't have any right. You stopped her, there was no infraction for her person, and now you're asking for her to identify herself. And they called on Code 103 and 102 of the Highway Safety Code, which does state that a peace officer has the right to ask any person who is driving a motor vehicle for their license and their registrations to the vehicle. It doesn't say that the peace officer can take that license and registration, walk back to it with the car, and then subsequently issue a ticket or try to issue a ticket. Although that's not what they tried to do here. They were just asking for that piece of identification. But nevertheless, I said, well, there's no obligation upon her to produce that ID for you. She hasn't caused any infraction. So he switched his role, and he wanted to have her identify herself as a peace officer. So with a little bit more conversation, I began to explain to them the difference between a human being and a legal person. And the young man who was on my side, he seemed very interested. He was listening to me, but he claimed ignorance. He kept claiming to me that he didn't understand what a person was, and he didn't understand that there was a difference between a human being. And the fact that a human being was free and had no obligations to these enactments. So I continued to proceed to try to explain it to him, but obviously it's kind of hard for him to grasp that understanding when you're standing on the side of the road and cars are going by, and you're in a situation where adrenaline is pumping a little bit because they're trying to issue a ticket, but they're getting opposition from someone. I asked for a supervisor to come by. Now, these two cops that had actually pulled us over, even through all this, they were very respectful. They listened, they were willing, they were questioning, but they listened, and they were respectful from a man to a man. The supervisor, when he came by, I expected him, because he would be in a position of authority, to have more knowledge than those who were issuing the tickets. And I just say that because of the fact that they give a man a title. So when you expect a man to have a title, you expect him to have knowledge and understanding attached with that title. So when I began to speak with this man, he didn't have any understanding at all. He had less understanding, and not only that, he was not even interested in hearing with what I had to say. I basically, for 2 minutes to 3 minutes, explained to him shortly and quickly what was going on and why there was no obligation. And at the end of my conversation, his response to me was, this is Canada. We live here in Quebec. What country are you coming from? You're like on another planet. And I said to him, I said, that's kind of a ridiculous response to me. And I didn't know what to say back, because I wasn't expecting someone to say that. I was expecting for him to come back with some type of proper procedure, some type of law, some type of rebuttal that was based in law. Not something just off the handle like that. Anyways, the whole situation ended. The cops, not that we were free to go. We left, no ticket was issued, and I told them, I said, listen, you stopped us now, and you tried to apply these security routière or the highway safety code upon us, and there's no obligation for a human being. And I informed them, I said, there's times that I travel without a license plate from any government-issued bureaucracy, if you will, and if you stop me, you're breaking my rights as a human being. And that will be a different situation, because if I refuse to identify myself and you proceed to arrest me, you are then causing me damage as a human being and forcing me to invoke habeas corpus to go before the court to get my freedom, and then subsequently have to come against your organization because you don't understand what's going on, because your police force hasn't been taught the fact that you are enforcing rules and regulations upon juridical personalities, legal persons, that are operating under rights and privileges that have been granted to them from Her Majesty the Queen. I'm starting to wonder just how much the police know, because even though that young man was questioning me, I know what the Criminal Code of Canada says. I know what these enactments and regulations say. Yes, in the Highway Safety Code, you do not get a mention of Her Majesty the Queen. If you're here in Quebec operating as a police officer or a peace officer, and you read the Highway Safety Code, there's no mention of Her Majesty the Queen. So if that's your only understanding concerning what's going on in law, when you come against the truth, it's hard for you to swallow. But as a peace officer, you're following the Criminal Code of Canada, are you not? You're under the Criminal Code of Canada. And in the Criminal Code of Canada, it's very clear who's in control. Is it not? Her Majesty. So for anyone that is on the street that a peace officer deals with, and this man or woman or human being begins to express the fact of Her Majesty's realm, and of the fact of being a human being and not a person, and then you claim ignorance, it's hard for me personally to accept that. Because if you are in your position studying the Criminal Code of Canada like you should be doing, because you are enforcing these rules and regulations, then you're going to come across a lot of these articles that do talk about the citizen, or a person, or an everyone, and the fact that this is about Her Majesty, and that we are, the human beings have been incorporated into the city. And then for you to stand on the street and say, well, I don't understand any of this, none of this makes sense, it's all brand new to me. It's hard to accept that. It's hard to believe that. It means in one way that then you're failing in your responsibilities as a peace officer. That's what it means. Because as a peace officer, under the Criminal Code of Canada, you have a duty. You have a duty to identify and make a distinction between what a citizen is, what a person is, and what a human being is, or what a man and woman is, and what they can be held accountable to, and what jurisdiction they can be placed under. And when you stand there with your hands up claiming ignorance, whether it's true or not, first of all, it's, again, hard to accept, because you're in a position of so-called authority, and we would expect you to have the knowledge and the understanding on what rights and what duties you have, and what you can and cannot do. But yet you claim that you do not understand that. So subsequent to that, I sent these two officers some information, paper information and internet over the email, to help them to understand what's happening here in Canada. As I said, they were very respectful. Whether they were playing ignorant or not, they were very respectful. Supervisor, no. And I sent to that subsequent police station a notice, not a notice of claim of right, and also a notice to let them know also what's transpiring. Because they went through education, all of these men and women who work for these police forces, and they were not taught this side of the law. It seems, unless they're claiming ignorance. I don't have much interaction with police officers. I do study their laws. I do understand what their laws say here in Quebec. I do understand what their laws say provincial by provincial. I do understand the criminal code. So, but when I have the limited interaction with these men and women, it seems to me that, again, unless they're doing a great job of playing the face of innocence, that their education was not complete. They were taught only one side of what's going on here. They were taught the side of the Canadian citizen, the legal person who has an obligation to Her Majesty and to these enactments that are operating with rights and privileges, and that's it. And that's sad, because I see the police force, I see the construction or operation that's going on within that system as like a rotating force. Well, if we don't teach this police officer what is actually going on in law, and if he breaks a jurisdiction, or if he breaks or does something that's going to cost him his job, well, he goes out the door and there's another one to replace him right away. And that's kind of sad, because, you know, nobody's expendable. Not a police officer, not a man, not a woman, nobody's expendable. And if someone's put all their effort and energy by going through a schooling and getting a license and going through training for whatever motive they had to be out there on the street, and now they're enforcing rules and regulations that they don't really understand what they're doing, and one day they're going to do something that's going to cost them their job, whose responsibility should that be? I don't think it should fall on the peace officer or the police officer. If he fails to understand his duties, there is some accountability on him, but I would say the accountability would fall upon those who taught him what his position, what his duties and responsibilities were in that position. Anyways.